Have you ever had a secret so big it felt like a stone in your stomach? A secret you didn't even know you were keeping? I found out what mine was on the day my family left me crying on a pier. The man I called Uncle Ben my whole life, the one who gave me candy and patted my head, was not my family. He was a monster wearing my uncle's face, and he had been holding onto a piece of paper for 20 years. A single piece of paper that would either tear my world apart or give me the power to burn his down. My name is Mary Tall. I'm 28 years old, a nursing assistant, and a single mom to the sweetest 7-year-old boy on earth, Leo. We live in a tiny apartment where the water heater is more of a suggestion than a guarantee. I work double shifts just to keep the lights on and Leo in shoes that fit. My life is a world away from my mother's family. They live in big houses, drive shiny cars, and go on vacations they post all over social media. They see me as the family failure, the cautionary tale they whisper about at Thanksgiving. If you've ever been made to feel small by the very people who are supposed to love you, if you've ever had to smile while your heart was breaking, then I'm asking you from the bottom of my soul to please subscribe to my channel. Your support isn't just a number to me. It's a hand reaching out, telling me that I'm not alone in this fight. It gives me the strength to tell this story. Please, I really need you right now. Let's get through this together. It would mean the world to me. The whole family was gathering in Miami for my Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben's 30th anniversary cruise. A full week in the Caribbean. For months, the family group chat was filled with pictures of fancy dresses and talk of excursions. I knew I couldn't afford to go. A ticket cost more than 2 months of my rent. But Aunt Carol insisted I come to the bon voyage party at the port. "It's for family, Mary," she'd said on the phone, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "You have to be there to see us off." I came straight from my shift at the hospital, still in my pale blue scrubs because I didn't have time to change. I walked into the fancy port terminal, a cavern of glass and steel, and felt every eye on me. They were all there, my cousins in sparkling dresses, my uncles in pressed shirts, sipping champagne. On a table were little gift bags. My cousin Jessica was handing them out. Inside each was a boarding pass and a room key. She walked right past me, a smirk on her face, and I knew. There was no bag for me. My Aunt Carol, wearing a diamond necklace that could have paid off my student loans, walked over to me. She didn't hug me. She just looked at my scrubs with disgust. "Oh, Mary," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "I'm so glad you could make it to our little party." She then leaned in closer, her perfume making me want to gag, and she whispered the words that shattered what was left of my heart. "But you can't come on board. We all chipped in, but you see, you're too poor to join us." The room went silent for a second, and then I heard it. A snicker from Jessica. Someone else coughed to hide a laugh. My face burned hot with shame. It was like a spotlight was on me, showing everyone how little I was, how poor, how unwanted. My own family. They didn't just exclude me. They set me up to humiliate me in front of everyone. Uncle Ben just stood beside his wife, smiling a weak little smile, not saying a word. I felt tears welling up, hot and angry, and I couldn't stay there a second longer. I turned and ran. I didn't care who saw me. I burst through the glass doors and stumbled onto the pier, the salty air hitting my face. The giant cruise ship loomed beside me, a floating city of lights and laughter, ready to sail away to paradise and leave me in the dirt. I could hear their music, their joy. Tears streamed down my cheeks, mixing with the sweat from my long shift. I felt so completely and utterly alone, a tiny broken thing in the shadow of their wealth. I was nothing to them. But then, a different sound cut through the noise of the party. It wasn't the loud, clumsy horn of the cruise ship. It was a deeper, more powerful hum, like a giant cat purring. I wiped my eyes and looked past the cruise ship, out into the dark water of the bay. Something was moving fast, slicing through the waves. It was long, sleek, and glowed with a brilliant white light. It was a yacht, but it was bigger and more beautiful than any boat I had ever seen. It made the massive cruise ship look like a rusty old barge. The yacht pulled up to a private dock just a few feet from where I stood. On its deck, a man in a crisp white suit stood watching the shore. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him at first. Then he turned his head, and the light from the port caught his face. My breath caught in my throat. It was my godfather, Mr. Alistair. A man my family told me had lost all his money years ago. A man they called a failure. He raised a hand, not to the family waving from the cruise ship, but directly at me. He wasn't smiling. His eyes were filled with a sad understanding. He knew. He knew what they had done. And I knew, in that gut-wrenching moment, that my life was about to change forever. What happens next will expose a secret that my family has buried for 2 decades. A secret that will make my Aunt Carol's cruelty look like child's play. You are not going to want to miss a second of this. Before we continue, I want you to do something for me. Please comment where you're watching this from. I truly believe that as you type your city or country, a wave of unexpected joy and good fortune will find its way to you and your beautiful family this week. And please, I am begging you, hit that subscribe button. Your support is the only thing keeping me strong enough to tell this story. Don't miss what happens when my godfather steps off that yacht. Mr. Alistair stepped off the yacht, and the ground seemed to shake with every step he took. The noisy party on the cruise ship went quiet. All I could hear was the gentle rocking of the water and the terrified thumping of my own heart. He walked right past the fancy cars and the security guards, his eyes never leaving mine. He didn't even glance at my family, who were now crowded against the ship's railing, their mouths wide open like stunned fish. He came and stood right in front of me, this man I thought was poor and lost, and gently wiped a tear from my cheek with his thumb. "Mary," he said, his voice a low, sad rumble. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry I am late." From the corner of my eye, I could see Aunt Carol's face. It was a mask of pure shock, her painted-on smile completely gone. Uncle Ben looked even worse. He was pale, like all the blood had drained from his face. He looked like he had just seen a ghost. And in a way he had. Mr. Alistair was a ghost from their past. A past they thought they had buried forever. A past where they had made promises they never planned to keep. But what promises? And why did the sight of this man turn my confident, cruel uncle into a scared little boy? "They broke a promise," Mr. Alistair said, as if reading my mind. He looked up at the cruise ship, at my Uncle Ben's terrified face. "A promise they made to your father on his deathbed." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. My father. I barely remembered him. He died when I was just 8 years old. All I had were blurry memories of a kind smile and strong arms that lifted me up to the sky. My family never talked about him. It was as if he was a secret they had all agreed to forget. What promise did they make to a dying man? His words sent me tumbling back in time. I was 8 years old again, sitting on the floor of my father's bedroom. The room smelled like medicine and sadness. My dad was in his bed, looking so small and tired. Uncle Ben and a younger Mr. Alistair were standing beside him. My father coughed, a weak, rattling sound, and took both their hands. "Promise me," my father whispered, his voice thin like paper. "Promise me you'll take care of my little girl. Promise me she will get what is hers when the time is right. She is all I have." I remember Mr. Alistair crying. Big, silent tears rolled down his face as he squeezed my father's hand. "I promise, Michael," he choked out. "I will protect her with my life." Then my father looked at his own brother, my Uncle Ben. "Ben, promise me." Uncle Ben nodded quickly, but he wasn't looking at my dad. He was looking at a box of papers on the dresser. "Of course, brother," he said. "I promise." But even as a little girl, I felt a coldness in his words. It was the same coldness I felt on the pier today. The memory vanished, leaving me standing on the cold concrete, my heart aching for the father I barely knew. I looked from Mr. Alistair's kind, sad face to my Uncle Ben, who was now hiding behind Aunt Carol on the deck of the ship. He couldn't even look at me. The shame and guilt were written all over his face. He hadn't just broken a promise to his dying brother. He had been lying to me my entire life. But what was the lie? What was it that was supposed to be mine? What was in that box of papers? Suddenly, Aunt Carol snapped out of her shock. She plastered a big, fake smile on her face and waved frantically. Alistair! My goodness! Is that you? We had no idea you were doing so well. You simply must come and join us. There's plenty of room. Her voice was sickly sweet, dripping with a greed so obvious it made my stomach turn. She saw the yacht, the expensive suit, and she wanted a piece of it. She didn't care about him or me or a promise made 20 years ago. She only cared about money. Mr. Alistair didn't even honor her with a look. He just shook his head slowly. No, Carol, he said, his voice loud enough for them all to hear. I have no desire to celebrate with thieves and liars. He then turned back to me and his eyes softened. We don't need their ship, Mary. We have our own. He gestured back to the gleaming white yacht. And it's time you came aboard and learned the truth. I felt a flicker of hope, the first one I had felt all day. Chance for answers. Chance to escape. He then reached inside his perfectly tailored jacket and pulled something out. It was an old envelope, yellowed with age, its edges soft and worn. It was sealed with a dark red wax stamp. My heart started beating faster. It looked ancient, important. It felt like I was looking at a treasure from a sunken ship. He held it out to me, his hand steady. Your Uncle Ben was supposed to give this to you on your 25th birthday, he said softly. It's from your father. My whole body started to shake. A letter from my father. After all these years. I reached out with a trembling hand and took the envelope. Felt heavy, full of secrets. From the deck of the cruise ship, my Uncle Ben finally found his voice. He leaned over the railing, his face red with panic. Mary, don't open that, he screamed, his voice cracking. Listen to me. It's better you don't know. It will ruin you. Mr. Alistair looked me straight in the eye. His expression calm and fierce. He's wrong, Mary, he said, his voice cutting through my uncle's frantic shouts. It won't ruin you. It will give you the keys to the kingdom they stole from you. The company your father built, the one they told you went bankrupt. It's all in there. Keys to a kingdom they stole from me. The words hung in the air, heavier than the humid Miami night. A company my father built. Didn't make sense. My family always told me my dad was a simple handyman, a dreamer who left my mom with nothing but debts. They told me he was kind but foolish with money. I looked at the old yellowed envelope in my hand. It was trembling, or maybe I was. My whole life, every story I had been told, was suddenly a lie held together by cheap glue, and this letter was the one thing that could dissolve it all. My uncle's face, high up on the ship, was a mess of fear and anger. She doesn't need to know, he shrieked, his voice sounding thin and weak from so far away. Alistair, you snake. You promised to stay away. Aunt Carol grabbed his arm, trying to pull him back, her own face a pale, horrified mask. She was no longer looking at me, but at the other passengers who were now staring, whispering, pointing. Her perfect party, her grand show of wealth and power, was crumbling into a public spectacle of shame. The humiliation she designed for me was now all hers. Mr. Alistair paid them no mind. He placed a gentle hand on my back, guiding me away from the noise, away from the stairs. Let them shout to the wind, he said, his voice calm and steady, an anchor in my storm of confusion. Their words are as empty as their promises. He led me toward the gleaming yacht. Every step felt like a dream. The wood of the gangplank was smooth and solid beneath my worn-out sneakers. I was leaving the girl in the dirty scrubs on the pier and stepping into a world I didn't understand, a world of secrets and impossible wealth. Once on board, the city's noise faded away, replaced by a quiet hum. The yacht was like a floating palace, all polished wood and soft, glowing lights. It was bigger than my entire apartment building. But I couldn't see the beauty. All I could see was the letter in my hand. Felt like it was burning my skin. My father's handwriting. After 20 years of silence, A part of him was right here, in my hands, waiting to speak. I was so scared to open it. What if my uncle was right? What if the truth was too much to bear? What would you do? If you were holding a letter that could change everything you thought you knew about your life, your family, your past, would you tear it open right away? Or would you be scared like I was? Scared that the life you knew, even a hard and sad one, was better than a truth that could break you completely. I just clutched it to my chest, the old paper crinkling against my scrubs, and I began to cry again. Not the angry, humiliated tears from before, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs of a lost little girl. Mr. Alastair led me to a soft white couch and sat opposite me. He waited patiently for my tears to slow. "Your father, Michael," he began softly, "was not a handyman. He was a genius. He created something special, something that changed the way people live." My mind raced. What could it be? My dad, a genius. I remembered him showing me how to fix a leaky faucet, how to build a birdhouse. Those were the memories they let me keep. Simple. Nothing about him being a genius. Nothing about a company. Ben was his business partner, Mr. Alastair continued, his eyes dark with old pain. And I was their lawyer. After your father got sick, Ben started moving things around, changing papers, creating new companies. He told me your father wanted to sell, that the business was failing. He produced documents, signed and everything. I was young, I trusted him. He was family. He shook his head, a deep anger in his eyes. By the time your father passed, Ben owned everything. He told everyone, including me, that the company had gone bankrupt and that he'd lost all his money too. The memory of my father's tired face came back to me. "Promise me she will get what is hers." He knew. My father knew his own brother was betraying him, even as he was dying. That's why he made them promise. That's why he made a second promise from me, his lawyer. He must have known Ben would lie. He was trying to protect me from beyond the grave. And my uncle Ben, he didn't just break a promise. He danced on his own brother's grave, stole his legacy, and then raised me on the scraps, making me feel worthless my whole life. "Ben pushed me out," Mr. Alastair said, his voice low. "He paid people to spread rumors that I was a terrible lawyer, that I had lost my mind. He ruined my reputation. For years I had nothing. But I never forgot my promise to your father. I worked, I fought, I rebuilt my life from scratch, all for this day. All to find the proof I needed and give you back what is rightfully yours." He leaned forward, his gaze intense. "The letter in your hand is only the beginning, Mary. It's his last will. The real one." I looked down at the envelope, my fingers tracing the faded wax seal. Inside was my father's voice, a final message from a man I barely knew, a man they had tried to erase. My fear was still there, but now something else was growing beside it. Anger. A hot, roaring fire was starting to burn in my chest. They didn't just make me poor. They made me an orphan twice over by taking my father and then taking his memory. I looked at Mr. Alastair, my eyes clear. "What was the company?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What did my father build?" He gave me a sad, proud smile. "He built the company your uncle now chairs. The one he and Carol are celebrating 30 years of success with. He named it after your mother. It's called Tall Comfort Living." Tall Comfort Living. The name echoed in the silent, luxurious cabin of the yacht, a name I had seen 1,000 times before. It was a brand I knew. It was on the side of delivery trucks that rumbled through my city. It was on the bottom of the special reclining chairs at the nursing home where I worked. I had pushed elderly patients in wheelchairs with that name stamped on the back. My whole life, I had been surrounded by my father's legacy, by the wealth that should have been mine, and I was completely blind to it. It was like living in a house and never knowing there was a treasure buried right under your feet. A memory, sharp and painful, flashed in my mind. I was 19, working at a diner, and my car had broken down in the pouring rain. I was walking home, my cheap shoes soaked through, when one of their big, shiny trucks drove past. It hit a puddle and splashed muddy water all over my thin coat. I remember looking up, crying with frustration, and seeing the elegant logo. Tall Comfort Living. I hated that truck. Hated that name. I hated their success while I was suffering. I never knew I was hating my own stolen inheritance. And the name itself. Tall. They named it after my mother. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They stole everything from my father, left his wife and child with almost nothing, and then they used her name to build their empire. They made her a brand, a label on their stolen goods, while the real woman struggled to make ends meet until she passed away from a broken heart and exhaustion. They didn't just steal a company. They stole our very name, our identity, and twisted it into a symbol of their greed. I finally looked up from the letter, the paper crinkling in my tight grip. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, quiet rage that felt like ice in my veins. "What is it?" I asked, my voice flat and empty. "What does Tall Comfort Living do?" I knew, but I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear the words that would connect the last piece of the puzzle, the piece that tied my miserable life directly to their glorious one. I needed to know what my father, the simple handyman, had created. "Your father was a brilliant inventor," Mr. Alastair said. His eyes filled with a deep respect. "He saw your grandmother struggle in her old age. He invented a new kind of hospital bed that could be adjusted with a simple remote. He designed chairs that help people stand up. He created things to bring comfort to the sick and the elderly." My heart stopped. I worked with that equipment every single day. I had even told my coworkers how amazing the designs were, how much they helped our patients. I had been admiring my own father's genius without even knowing it. He could see the shock on my face. "They told you he left you nothing, Mary. But that's the biggest lie of all." He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. He knew Ben. He knew what he was capable of. "This letter," he said, tapping the envelope in my hand, "is his last will. But it's more than that. It refers to a second piece of evidence. Failsafe he hid for you. It's in your childhood home. A set of original design plans and a signed partnership agreement that Ben never knew existed. My childhood home. My mind flew back to a small blue house with a big oak tree in the front yard. A place of warmth and love, a place I hadn't seen in 20 years. But Uncle Ben sold that house right after Dad died, I said, my voice trembling. He told us all of Dad's things were given away to charity. He gave me one box of old photos and said that was all that was left. Uncle Ben, the loving brother, the grieving family member, had controlled everything. He didn't just sell the house. He had scoured it, looking for anything that could expose him. He looked, Mr. Alastair confirmed. But your father was smarter. He hid it in a place only a child would think to look. A place a greedy man would never see. My fingers fumbled with the old wax seal on the envelope. My fear was gone, replaced by a burning need for justice. I had to see my father's words. I had to know where he had left his final gift to me. Carefully broke the seal. The paper inside was thick and old. I unfolded it. The first line, written in a beautiful strong cursive, made my whole body shake. It said, "My dearest Mary, if you are reading this, it means I am gone and my brother has betrayed me." Just as I read those haunting words, a man in a captain's uniform quietly entered the cabin. He looked worried. "Mr. Alastair, sir," he said, his voice urgent. "There's a problem." He pointed out the large window toward the pier. The giant cruise ship was still there. Its engines were silent. The happy music had stopped. It was supposed to have sailed 20 minutes ago. My family was not going on vacation. A cold dread washed over me. They weren't running away. They were preparing for a fight. Mr. Alastair stood up and walked to the window, picking up a pair of binoculars from a table. He stared at the ship for a long, silent moment. I could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. He lowered the binoculars, his face grim. "Ben isn't a fool," he said, his voice dark and low. "He's not just sitting there. He's on his phone. He turned to look at me, his eyes full of a new urgency, a new danger. He's calling his lawyers. And worse. He's sending the port security down to the pier. Mary, they're not coming to talk. They're coming for that letter. My blood ran cold. Port security. They were coming for the letter. The only proof I had that I wasn't crazy, that my life was a lie built by my own family. I looked out the window and saw them. 2 men in crisp uniforms, running down the long pier, their heavy boots thudding on the wood. They weren't walking. They were running with purpose. They were coming to take my father's last words away from me. My hand instinctively crushed the old envelope, protecting it. It was no longer just a piece of paper. It was my father's soul. It was my only hope for justice. "Captain, get us out of here." "Now," Mr. Alistair commanded. His voice sharp and loud, cutting through my fear. There was no panic in him, only action. The yacht, which had been sitting silent and graceful on the water, roared to life. A deep, powerful vibration ran through the floor, and I grabbed the side of the couch to steady myself. Outside, the security guards started shouting, waving their arms, but it was too late. With a surge of incredible power, the yacht pulled away from the dock, leaving the 2 guards standing there, helpless and small, under the glare of the port lights. As we glided out into the dark, open water, the giant cruise ship looked like a sad, forgotten toy. I could still see my family crowded on the deck, their fancy clothes and shocked faces getting smaller and smaller until they were just specks of light. We were escaping. But we weren't running away. We were running towards a fight. I looked down at the letter in my hand, the seal now broken, my father's elegant handwriting calling to me from the past. With the city lights of Miami painting streaks across the window, I finally began to read. "My dearest Mary," it began, and in my head, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in 20 years, a voice I thought I had forgotten. "If you are reading this, it means I am gone, and my brother has betrayed me. I am so sorry, my little star. I am sorry I could not stay to protect you." A tear dripped from my eye and landed on the old paper, smudging the ink. "He has stolen everything. He will tell you I was a failure, that I left you with nothing. That is a lie. Everything that is tall comfort living came from my mind and my hands." The letter went on to explain the basics. How my Uncle Ben had forged papers, lied to investors, and pushed him out of his own company while he was weak and dying from sickness. He wrote about a single payment Ben had made to my mother after he died. A check for $5,000. My uncle called it a final, generous gift from a bankrupt company. $5,000. That was the price he put on my father's entire life's work. That was the price of our silence and our struggle, while he was making millions of dollars every single month. The words started to blur through my tears, but I kept reading, my heart pounding in my chest. "He thinks he has erased me," the letter continued. "But I was always one step ahead of him. He is greedy, but he is not smart. He never understood the real value of things. He only sees money, not memories. He will never find what I have hidden for you, my darling girl. He will never think to look in a place so small, a place filled with so much love." What did he mean? Where could he hide something so important that a thief like my uncle would never find it? Then I saw it. The last paragraph. A clue. "Remember the little blue house inside our little blue house?" my father's letter asked. "The place where you kept your tiny family safe and sound from all the monsters in the world. Go there, Mary. Look in the place where the father of the house always sits to rest after a long day. It is waiting for you. My real legacy. Real name. It's all there." My breath caught in my throat. I knew exactly what he meant. My mind shot back through time, to a dusty corner of my childhood bedroom. Dollhouse. It was a perfect copy of our little blue house, a gift he had built for me with his own 2 hands. It had tiny furniture, tiny curtains, and a tiny family that looked just like us. And in the tiny living room, there was a tiny armchair where I always placed the father doll. A place a greedy man would never see. The original designs. The real partnership agreement. They had to be there, hidden inside that tiny chair for 20 years. My father was a genius. He had left me a treasure map written in the language of a daughter's love. I looked up at Mr. Alistair, my eyes wide with understanding. "The dollhouse," I whispered, my voice choked with emotion. "It's in the dollhouse in my old bedroom." A flicker of a smile crossed his face, but it vanished as quickly as it came. He was looking at his phone, his expression turning grim and serious. "Mary," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Ben is no longer on the ship. He got into a car the moment he saw us leave. I've been tracking him." He looked up from his phone, his eyes locking onto mine, filled with a new and terrifying danger. My heart, which had just been soaring with hope, plummeted into my stomach. "Where is he going?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. The cold dread was back, worse than before. "Where do you think?" Mr. Alistair said, his voice tight. "He's going to the only place he knows to look. He's going to your childhood home. He's going there to destroy it all." He turned to the captain. "How fast can this thing go?" The captain answered, but I barely heard him. All I could think about was my uncle in his fancy suit, breaking down the door to that little blue house. His greedy hands reaching for my dollhouse, ready to tear it apart and burn the last piece of my father to ash. My world narrowed to a single terrifying thought. Uncle Ben was going to burn my dollhouse. He was going to burn the last piece of my father. The powerful engines of the yacht roared, and the boat sliced through the dark water faster than I thought possible. The city lights of Miami, which had looked so beautiful just moments before, now seemed like the eyes of a monster, watching me race toward a past I could not afford to lose. Every second we spent on the water was a second my uncle was getting closer to destroying everything. He wasn't just a thief. He was an eraser of memories, a man who wanted to wipe my father from existence. Mr. Alistair was a whirlwind of calm, focused energy. While I was frozen in panic, he was on his phone, his voice low but firm. "I need the fastest car you have waiting at Pelican Marina. Not in 10 minutes. Now." He snapped his phone shut and turned to me, his eyes serious but reassuring. "We will beat him, Mary. Your father planned for this. He knew his brother's greed would one day lead him back to that house. This is not the end of the plan. It's the final part of it." But how could my father have planned for a high-speed race across a city 20 years in the future? The smell of the salt and the sea air suddenly took me back. I was 7 years old, standing on the lawn of the little blue house. My dad was on a ladder, painting the front door a cheerful shade of yellow. Uncle Ben had pulled up in his fancy car. I remember he didn't look at the house with love, the way my dad did. He looked at it like it was a thing, an object. "You're putting too much money into this place, Michael," I heard him say to my dad. "You'll never get it back." My dad just smiled. "It's not about money, Ben. It's a home." We reached the private marina in record time. Just as Mr. Alistair promised, a long black car was waiting, its engine humming. We practically jumped from the boat into the car's leather seats, and the tires squealed as we peeled out onto the street. The world became a blur of streetlights and neon signs. I clutched my father's letter to my chest. It felt warm, as if his strength was flowing from the paper into my hands. "Remember the little blue house inside our little blue house?" His words echoed in my head. A secret hidden in plain sight. Mr. Alistair's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his face tight with concern. "It's a traffic alert," he said, his voice grim. "Ben is 10 minutes ahead of us. He must have run every red light." A wave of hopelessness washed over me. 10 minutes. In 10 minutes, he could break down the door, run upstairs, and destroy everything. In 10 minutes, my whole life, my whole future could be turned to ash. I felt a scream building in my throat, a scream of pure, childish terror. We were going to be too late. "What if we don't make it?" I whispered, the words barely audible. "What if he gets there first?" Mr. Alistair didn't answer right away. He just told the driver, take the old coastal road. It will be longer, but there will be no traffic. Then he turned to me. Mary, think. Your father built that dollhouse. He built it to be strong. He knew you. Did you treat your dolls gently? I shook my head, a small, sad smile touching my lips for a second. No, I said. I was a clumsy kid. I was always dropping them. Exactly, he said. Your father built that house to survive a clumsy child. It will not be so easy for Ben to break. A new fear gripped me. Who lives there now? Yes. We can't just break in. What if they call the police on us? Mr. Alistair had already thought of that. An elderly couple, the Millers. They bought the house a year after your father passed. I have their number. I will call them when we are close. We have to hope they are kind people. We were relying on the kindness of strangers to reclaim a stolen kingdom. The odds felt impossible, stacked against us like a tower of blocks about to fall. Finally, the driver made a sharp turn, and my heart leaped into my throat. I knew this street. The giant oak tree I used to climb was still there, its branches like old, welcoming arms reaching out in the darkness. We're here, the driver said. And then I saw it. The little blue house. It looked smaller than I remembered, but it was just as I had left it. The yellow door my father had painted was now a boring white, but it was still home. And parked right in front of it, like a giant black spider, was my Uncle Ben's expensive Jaguar. He was here. He had beaten us. We slid out of the car, moving like shadows, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would break through my ribs. Mr. Alistair held a finger to his lips, signaling for silence. We crept across the soft, damp grass of the front lawn, the house looming over us. The windows were dark. There were no lights on inside. There was no sound of breaking glass, no shouting. There was just an eerie, terrifying silence. For a second, a tiny bit of hope flickered inside me. Maybe he couldn't get in. Maybe he had already given up and left. But then, as we got closer to the side of the house, a strange smell hit my nose. It was the smell of smoke. My eyes shot up to the second-floor window, the window of my old bedroom. And what I saw made my blood freeze and my soul feel like it was being ripped from my body. A faint, sickening orange light was flickering inside the dark room. It danced against the glass, a tiny fire growing in the darkness. He wasn't smashing the dollhouse. He was carefully, quietly, burning it from the inside out. He was burning my father's last secret, and we were watching it happen. The orange light flickered like a demon's eye in the window of my room. A scream, raw and full of pain, ripped from my throat. I was about to run, to throw myself at the door and claw my way in, but Mr. Alistair grabbed my arm, his grip like steel. "No, Mary. Stop," he hissed, his voice a sharp whisper in the dark. "He wants you to be emotional. He wants you to make a mistake. We do this smart or we lose everything." I looked at him, my eyes wild with panic. "But he's burning it. He's burning my father." I sobbed, the smoke in the air feeling like a poison in my lungs. He pulled me back behind the shadow of the giant oak tree, his face a grim, determined mask in the moonlight. "I'm calling the owners now," he said, already dialing a number on his phone. Every ring felt like a hammer blow against my heart. What if they didn't answer? What if they thought we were crazy? The phone rang once. A lifetime passed in those seconds. The flickering light in the window seemed to grow brighter, hungrier. On the third ring, a sleepy voice answered. "Hello." Mr. Alistair didn't waste a second. "Mr. Miller, my name is Alistair Croft. I am the lawyer for the daughter of the man who built your house. There is an intruder inside right now, and he is setting a fire." There was a pause on the other end of the line, and my hope shriveled. He was going to hang up. But then the old man's voice came back, surprisingly sharp and clear. "The little blue house. Michael Tall's old place?" he asked. "Yes," Mr. Alistair said quickly. "His brother is inside." The old man made a grumbling sound. "I never liked that man. Always snooping around after Michael passed. The spare key is still in the same place Michael kept it. Under the crooked gnome by the back porch. Get him out of my house. And tell Michael's little girl. Tell her we kept her room just the way her father left it. The crooked gnome. I remembered it. A fat, cheerful little statue with a chipped red hat that my father could never get to stand up straight. Hope, fierce and desperate, surged through me. We raced to the back of the house, our feet silent on the soft grass. There he was, the gnome, leaning against the foundation. Mr. Alastair reached under it, and his fingers closed around a cold metal key. As he slid it into the lock on the back door, the click sounded as loud as a gunshot in the silent night. The door swung open into the dark, quiet kitchen. The smell of smoke was thick and sickening in here. It wasn't the smell of a big fire, but of something small and contained, like paper being burned in a fireplace. It was the smell of my past turning into ash. We crept through the house, a place that was both familiar and strange. The furniture was different, but the walls, the floors, the way the moonlight fell through the dining room window, it was all the same. It was a house of ghosts, and tonight, a thief was among them. We reached the bottom of the stairs, the ones I used to run down every morning for breakfast. Each step we took on the staircase creaked, a sound that screamed our presence into the silent house. I held my breath, sure that at any moment my uncle would appear at the top of the stairs. But there was nothing, only the faint, dancing light from my bedroom door, which was slightly open at the end of the hall. We moved slower now, one step at a time, until we were standing right outside. I could hear a soft crackling sound from within. With a trembling hand, I put my eye to the thin crack in the door and looked inside. The sight stole the air from my lungs. My Uncle Ben was there, kneeling on the floor. He had my beautiful dollhouse, my father's masterpiece, laid open like he was performing surgery on it. He wasn't trying to burn the whole thing down. He had a small metal trash can beside him, and he was using a lighter to burn papers one by one, dropping them into the can. The orange glow was coming from these tiny, individual funerals for my father's work. He hadn't found the secret compartment yet. There was still time, but then I saw it. He used a small pocket knife to pry at the tiny armchair in the dollhouse's living room. A piece of the chair popped open, a piece I never even knew could move. His thick, greedy fingers reached inside and pulled out a small, tightly rolled bundle of documents, tied with an old string. He had found it. He had found my father's failsafe. It was over. We were too late. A sob caught in my throat, a sound of pure despair. My father's plan had failed. My uncle untied the string and unrolled the papers. He scanned them quickly, his face tense in the flickering firelight. He tossed the design plans into the fire without a second glance. He held up the partnership agreement, a cruel, triumphant smile spreading across his face as he held it over the flame. But then he stopped. His eyes narrowed, looking at a second document that had been rolled up with the first. It wasn't a design plan. It looked different, official. It had a seal at the bottom. What was it? What else had my father hidden? My uncle held this new paper up, his smile vanishing, replaced by a look of confusion, then dawning horror. He read the words, and his face went completely white. He looked like he had seen a ghost for the second time tonight. He opened his mouth to scream, a silent, terrified "oh" in the firelight. This paper was something else entirely. It was something he feared more than anything. Just as he was about to drop it into the flames to destroy it forever, Mr. Alastair slammed the door open, the sound echoing through the house like a thunderclap. "That's enough, Ben," he said, his voice cold as the grave. My Uncle Ben froze like a statue made of fear. The paper in his hand trembled, and the triumphant smile he wore just seconds before was gone, replaced by the face of a trapped animal. The only sounds were the crackling of the dying fire in the metal trash can and the frantic beating of my own heart. He didn't even look at Mr. Alastair. His eyes were locked on me, wide and pleading, as if the little girl he had lied to for 20 years could somehow save him now. He had the face of a man whose entire world had just collapsed on top of him. He made a sudden move, a desperate lunge to throw the paper into the fire. But Mr. Alastair was faster. He stepped forward and grabbed my uncle's wrist. His grip so strong that my uncle cried out in pain. The paper fluttered from his limp fingers and floated to the floor, landing right at my feet. I stared down at it, this strange, official-looking document that had turned my powerful uncle into a whimpering child. What was it? What final secret did my father plant that was even more powerful than his own will? I bent down and picked it up, my fingers shaking. It wasn't a will. It was a single page, and it was filled with my uncle's own handwriting. His big, loopy signature clear as day at the bottom. But the words were my father's. I could feel it. They were clever, sharp, and they had been laid like a perfect trap. As I read the first sentence aloud, my voice trembling, the whole room seemed to get colder. I, Benjamin Tall, of sound mind and body, do hereby confess. My uncle let out a strangled sob. My voice grew stronger with every word I read. It was a full confession, cleverly disguised by my father as a routine transfer of assets, something he must have had Uncle Ben sign in his sickbed. Detailed everything. How he created a fake company to buy out my father's shares for pennies. How he forged my father's signature on loan documents to make the company look like it was failing. How he systematically lied to their investors, their employees, and his own dying brother, all to steal the company for himself. It was all there in his own handwriting. A signed confession. Why? I finally whispered, looking up from the paper, my eyes burning with tears of rage. He was your brother. He loved you. Why would you do this to him? To us. My uncle sank to his knees, his expensive suit wrinkling on the dusty floor. He was no longer the powerful man from the cruise ship. He was just a pathetic, greedy little man. I had to, he cried, his voice thick with fake tears. He was a dreamer, Mary. He wanted to give away the patents, to make the equipment cheap for everyone. He would have run the company into the ground. I made it strong. I made it worth billions. He didn't get it. He still didn't understand. My father didn't care about being a billionaire. He cared about helping people, about easing their pain. My uncle had taken a dream of compassion and twisted it into a monument of greed. He hadn't just stolen a company. He had stolen its soul. You stole my life, I said, the words coming out low and dangerous. You let me work double shifts. You watched me struggle to feed my son, while you were living in a palace built on your brother's stolen dreams. You're not family. You are a monster. Mr. Alastair placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. Your father was a genius to the very end, he said quietly. He knew Ben would be so focused on finding the partnership agreement that he wouldn't even read the second document rolled up with it. He used Ben's own greed to trap him. The plan was perfect. My father had predicted this very night. He knew that one day, Ben's paranoia would lead him right back to this house, right to this dollhouse, and he would deliver the final piece of evidence into our hands himself. Uncle Ben scrambled forward on his knees, grabbing at the hem of my jeans. Mary, please, he begged, his face a pathetic mess of tears and sweat. We can make a deal. I'll give you anything. Money, a house, anything you want. Just don't show this to anyone. Think of the family. Think of what this will do to your cousins, to Carol. He was trying to use the family he had just humiliated and abandoned as a shield. The thought was so disgusting it made me want to be sick. I pulled my leg away from him in disgust. You stopped being family the day you let your brother die and stole his legacy, I said, my voice as cold as ice. I looked at Mr. Alastair, the signed confession clutched in my hand like a weapon. What happens now? Yes. Now, he said, pulling out his phone, a grim satisfaction in his eyes. We end this. But he didn't dial a lawyer. He dialed 3 numbers. 911. Yes, he said calmly into the phone. I'd like to report a breaking and entering and an arson currently in progress. My uncle's head snapped up, his eyes wide with utter terror. He finally understood. We weren't there to make a deal. We weren't there to negotiate. My father hadn't built this trap just so I could get rich. He had built it for justice. As Mr. Alastair gave the operator the address, a new sound filled the night, faint at first, then growing louder and louder. It was a siren, then another and another. Red and blue lights began to flash outside the window, washing over my uncle's horrified face, painting the room in the colors of his final defeat. He was trapped. There was no escape. The police were here. The flashing red and blue lights painted the walls of my old bedroom, turning the scene into a nightmare. My Uncle Ben, kneeling on the floor, looked up at the window, his face washed in the colors of his own capture. The wail of the sirens grew louder, closer, until it felt like it was inside my own head, screaming for the justice my father never got. 2 police officers appeared at the bedroom door, their faces serious, their hands resting on their belts. They took in the scene: the man in the expensive suit on the floor, the smoking metal can, and the old dollhouse with a piece pried open. It didn't take a detective to know they had walked into the end of a very long, very sad story. "Sir, I need you to stand up and put your hands behind your back," the first officer said, his voice calm but firm, leaving no room for argument. My uncle didn't move. He just stared at the confession in my hand, the piece of paper that had undone 20 years of lies in 20 seconds. "You can't," he whispered, his voice cracking. "This is a family matter. A misunderstanding." The officer stepped forward. "Sir, we have a report of breaking and entering and arson. Right now that's a police matter. Stand up." When he still didn't move, the officers grabbed his arms and hauled him to his feet. He was like a puppet with its strings cut. All the power, all the cruelty had drained out of him, leaving only a weak, trembling shell. As they snapped the cold metal handcuffs around his wrists, the sound echoed in the quiet room. It was the sound of a lock finally clicking into place, the sound of a cage door slamming shut. He was wearing a watch that probably cost more than my car, but in that moment, the cheap metal of the handcuffs was the only thing that mattered. He was a prisoner, brought down by a child's toy and a ghost's promise. He finally looked at me, his eyes searching for something. Pity, mercy, a flicker of the family connection he had destroyed. "Mary," he pleaded as the officers started leading him out. "Think of Leo, your son. Do you want him to grow up knowing his family destroyed each other? Think of what Carol will do." But what did he know about my son? He had never once sent Leo a birthday card. He didn't know his favorite color or his favorite superhero. He only used my son's name now as a final, desperate weapon. It was the most pathetic, most evil thing he had done all night. Mr. Alastair stepped between us, shielding me from his desperate eyes. "It's over, Ben," he said, his voice low. The police led him down the stairs and out the front door. We followed, stepping out onto the lawn just as they were putting him into the back of a police car. The lights of the car flashed across the faces of neighbors who were now peeking out of their windows, drawn by the sirens. The man who cared so much about his image, about his perfect reputation, was being arrested on the lawn of the house he had stolen, for all the world to see. I stood there on the damp grass, the confession still clutched in my hand, and I waited for the feeling of victory. I waited to feel happy, to feel a sense of peace. But it didn't come. All I felt was a deep, hollow sadness. A sadness for the father I barely knew, for the childhood I had lost, and even, in a strange, small way, for the pathetic man in the back of the police car. He had traded his brother's love for money and had ended up with neither. It was not a victory. It was a tragedy, 20 years in the making. As the police car pulled away, its sirens now silent, Mr. Alastair put a warm hand on my shoulder. "He will face justice, Mary. For the break-in, for the fire. And tomorrow, with this confession, we will begin the fight to take back tall comfort living. It will not be easy. Carol and her lawyers will fight dirty. But we will win." The future suddenly felt vast and terrifying. A legal battle. Boardrooms. People in suits who would try to tear me apart. Was I strong enough for that? I was just a nursing assistant who was good at calming scared patients. I didn't know how to fight dragons. I looked back at the little blue house, at the light still on in my old bedroom. Felt like my father was there watching over me. I had done it. I had honored his memory. But the fight was only just beginning. And what about my Aunt Carol and the rest of the family? They were still on that cruise ship, or what was left of their party. What would happen when they found out Ben had been arrested? Their world of fancy dresses and champagne was about to come crashing down, and I was the one holding the hammer. Suddenly, a new thought, cold and sharp, cut through my exhaustion. Why did my father need a failsafe in the first place? Why go to all the trouble of hiding a confession in a dollhouse? He had Mr. Alistair, his loyal lawyer. Why didn't he just give the confession to him for safekeeping? Why did my father seem to trust a child's hiding spot more than he trusted his own lawyer? A tiny seed of doubt, a question I was afraid to ask, began to sprout in my mind. Just as the last police car disappeared down the street, my uncle, from inside his cage, seemed to feel my doubt from across the distance. He pressed his face against the car's window, his eyes wild and desperate, and he screamed something. His words muffled by the glass, but I could read his lips perfectly. He wasn't screaming at me. He was screaming at Mr. Alistair. "Tell her," he yelled, his face twisted in a final hateful sneer. "Tell her what really happened to the first company. Tell her about the fire you started." The police car's taillights vanished down the street, but my uncle's words remained, hanging in the cold night air like a poison. "The fire you started." The accusation was so wild, so out of place, that it didn't make sense. I turned and looked at Mr. Alistair. His face, which had been so strong and determined, was suddenly filled with a deep, ancient sadness. He looked 20 years older. He didn't look at me, but at the little blue house, as if it held the memory of a pain he had carried his whole life. My heart sank. After all the lies, was this the final, most painful one? What did he mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I was so tired of secrets. I needed the truth, all of it, no matter how much it hurt. Mr. Alistair finally met my eyes, and I saw a shame so profound it almost brought me to my knees. "He was telling the truth, Mary," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. "Or a twisted piece of it. Before Tall Comfort Living there was another company. A smaller one, born in a garage. It was just called Tall and Tall. Your father's dream. And I am the one who burned it to the ground." He sat down on the damp steps of the back porch, the same steps I used to sit on and eat popsicles. "We were so young," he said, staring into the darkness. "Your father was the genius, I was the fresh-faced lawyer, and Ben handled the money. We worked out of an old rented workshop. Your father was creating his first designs, things that were going to change the world. We worked day and night. We were poor, but we were happy. We were building something that mattered." He paused, taking a shaky breath, and I knew the hardest part of the story was coming. "One night, I was the last one to leave the workshop," he continued, his voice cracking. "I was exhausted. I had been working on the patent papers for 3 days straight. There was faulty wiring to an old coffee pot I used to stay awake. I didn't notice the spark. I just locked up and went home. The next morning it was gone. Everything. The workshop, the prototypes, all of my legal files. A building of dreams turned to ash because I was tired and careless." Tears were now streaming down his face, silent and full of old pain. "It was an accident. But it was my fault." My mind reeled. An accident. A terrible, tragic accident. But Ben. What did Ben do? "He used it," I said, the pieces clicking together in my mind with horrifying clarity. "Ben used your guilt." Mr. Alistair nodded, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "He was the only one who knew I was the last one there. He told me it would ruin my career, that I could go to jail. He took the insurance money from the fire, and while your father was grieving the loss of his life's work, Ben used that money and my silence to build a new company from the ashes. A company he controlled completely." He had been living in a prison of guilt for 20 years, a prison my Uncle Ben had built for him. "Your father knew it was an accident," Mr. Alastair said, a small, sad smile on his lips. "He forgave me instantly. He told me, 'It was just wood and paper, Alastair. We are what matters.' But Ben held it over my head. It was his insurance policy. That's why your father couldn't just give me the confession. He knew Ben would use the fire to blackmail me, to force me to bury it. My promise to your father was chained by my own mistake. And then I finally understood. I understood the true genius of my father. The dollhouse wasn't a backup plan. It was the only plan. It was a message of love and trust sent across 20 years, from a father to a daughter, bypassing all the lies and secrets of broken men. He had trusted me, his little girl, to be the one to finally bring the truth to light. He knew my love was the one thing my uncle's greed could never touch and my godfather's guilt could never silence. It was a perfect, beautiful, heartbreaking plan. The first rays of sunlight began to peek over the rooftops, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and orange. A new day was beginning. I looked at the little blue house, then at Mr. Alastair, then at the confession still in my hand. The sadness was still there, but now it was mixed with something else. Strength, purpose. I knew what I had to do. I wouldn't let my father's dream of compassion be a tool for lawyers and corporate battles. I would take it back and rebuild it just like he would have wanted. "We're not going to just take the company," I said, my voice clear and strong. "We are going to change it. We're going to make it his again." This journey has been the hardest of my life, and telling this story has taken every bit of courage I have. If you have been on this journey with me, if you have felt my pain and my anger and my hope, then you are a part of my family now. A truer family than the one I was born into. I am asking you from the bottom of my heart to please hit that like button, to share this story with someone who needs to know that hope is never lost, and to subscribe to my channel. Your support is the light that is guiding me out of the darkness. Please don't let me walk the rest of this path alone. I walked over to Mr. Alastair and helped him to his feet. The sun was warmer now, chasing the shadows from the lawn. For the first time, the future didn't feel like a terrifying storm. Felt like an open road. There would be fights, and there would be challenges, but I was not the same woman who had cried on the pier just last night. I was not a victim. I was the daughter of a genius, the keeper of a promise, and the mother of a little boy I was going to give the world to. I was Mary Tall and I was finally going home.